On today's show, a former FBI hostage negotiator and New York Times best-selling author by the name of Chris Voss teaches field-tested principles for effective negotiation. How to get what you want while maintaining effective relationships. Why he who has learned to disagree without being disagreeable has discovered the most valuable secret of negotiation. How to quickly establish rapport, and much, much more.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrivetime Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here.
Thrive Nation, welcome back to another exciting edition of the Thrivetime Show on your radio and podcast download. And on today's show, we are interviewing Chris Voss, who is a former top FBI hostage negotiator. And he's teaching field-tested tools for talking anybody into or out of just about anything. Chris was a member of the New York City Joint Terrorism Task Force from 1986 to 2000. Chris Voss is the author of the best-selling book. You've probably recognized the title. It's called Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended Upon It. And he's a great American. Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm really good, thanks. Happy to be here. I think I'm pumped up just from that introduction.
Well, Chris, I've been taking steroids for several weeks to get pumped up, to do it properly, to do you justice. So let me ask you this, though. Your book is now a runaway bestseller. And for the listeners out there, though, that aren't as familiar with the book and what it's all about, could you share with our listeners what kind of nuggets of knowledge they're going to find in this book?
Yeah, it's how to get what you want pretty much across the board and still have great relationships with people. Most people think you can have one or the other, a great relationship or get what you want. We want people to do both.
So you're teaching that it's possible to get what you want and not to destroy relationships in the process. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's pretty much it. The bank robber inside the bank, we got no way to force him to do anything. He's got to give us what we want, and he's actually got to be happy about it, or he might not come out.
I can't possibly just begin to describe to our listeners out there verbally what it would be like, but I'd like to have you at least give it the old college try. What does it feel like to be a hostage negotiator when you are in the middle of an intense negotiation? What's going on in your mind?
You're dialed in. I mean, you're focused. You're listening for the subtle nuances that tells you the direction it's going, or you're listening for the key. We used to say, "What's it going to take to get them to come out?" They'll tell you, but you got to keep them talking and get them to tell you. So it's a challenge. It's pretty cool.
What first inspired you to write your book?
Well, when I got out, when I left the bureau, I started teaching, and actually my son was there with me every step of the way, Brandon. So we're teaching in business schools. We're teaching hostage negotiation in business schools at Georgetown, at Harvard, and then at USC. And they were like, if you want people to actually pay attention and figure that you know what you're talking about, you got to put a book out there. So we finally did.
How long did it take you to sit down and write the book? What did that process look like when you and your son sat down to write this book?
Well, end to end, it took us about 3 years. We went through several writers, and if I'd have started with the guy that I finished with, Tal Raz is a genius business writer. He is a superstar. Like, if I'd have been with him the whole time, we'd have told you it was easy. He's that good. But Tal basically vacuumed all the information out of our brain. We had a library of material. We dumped on him tape recordings of every class we'd ever taught, video recordings, tons and tons of articles. And he sorted it all out and put it into a great book. So on our end, it was easy because we had the perfect partner.
Could you explain how we, or could you share how to spell his name? Because there's got to be somebody. We have so many listeners. We have hundreds of thousands of listeners, many of which are very, very successful. And maybe we just landed a new client for Mr. Tal Raz.
I can tell you, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to write a business book, he's your guy. And it's Tahl Raz, R-A-Z. He's Israeli. You know, I every now and then I tease him. I call him Tal Raz Al Ghul.
So now, Chris, in your book, you once wrote, you said, "He who has learned to disagree without being disagreeable has discovered the most valuable secret of negotiation." I'd love for you to break this down for our listeners.
Yeah, well, you know, that's pretty much it. Most people think that to say no, you got to yell at people, you got to call people names, you got to push back hard. That just makes things worse. People are so used to a hard pushback that if you know how to say no, how to not agree and be nice, they're so startled they actually want to cooperate. They'll actually, in many cases, make the deal for you.
So how do you draw that out of people?
Yeah, you know what? Real close to what you were doing right now. You keep asking me how questions. How is one of the great secrets to gaining the upper hand in a negotiation. And if you have offered me a proposal that I can't do or I don't want to do, more importantly, all I'm going to do is I'm really just going to say, how am I supposed to do that? And go silent and let you solve the problem for me.
Okay, so chapter 1 of your book is named The New Rules, How to Become the Smartest Person in Any Room. Could you tell us what this chapter is all about?
Yeah, you know, it really starts out with how to say no effectively. The reality is, if you tap into everybody else's emotional intelligence, actually you use your emotional intelligence to tap into their brains. That's what we're trying to do. Like if I get you to solve the problem for me, I'm putting your brain power on the problem. And I'm doing it in a way that makes you want to collaborate with me. Somebody told me the other night, they read the book, they said, this is how do we get together on the same team, and then how do we win as a team? Now, I'll get in this negotiation, and I'll recruit you to my team. You won't really know that. You'll just feel like there's this process where suddenly I'm not the problem. The adversary is the situation. And if the adversary is the situation, then you got to work with me. And now I'm tapping into your brain power to work it out.
The adversary is the situation.
Adversary is the situation. Yeah.
I agree with that. Now, you said emotional intelligence. Last night, we had Daniel Goleman on the show.
Wow.
Best-selling author of Emotional Intelligence. It appears to me that you might have read that book.
I'm familiar with his books, if you will. And one of the last ones he wrote is called Focus. And in that book, Goleman talks about 3 kinds of emotional intelligence. What we call tactical empathy, Goleman will call cognitive empathy. The definition is almost exactly the same. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read that book yet, but you know who he says is absolutely the very best at tactical empathy / cognitive empathy?
I do not know.
Sociopaths.
Sociopaths are the best with what?
At using cognitive empathy or tactical empathy.
Okay, fine. Here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is you just dropped knowledge bomb 1 and 2. So 1 and Marshall, that's just in 2. So you just said the word sociopath. Can you please indicate what the word sociopath means for the listeners out there?
Yeah, let's just I call a sociopath somebody who's not emotionally invested in whether you live or die. They're indifferent to the existence of human beings, other human beings. They're in love with themselves, but they're indifferent to what happens to you. Now, they're absent. One might say they're absent. What they lack is the emotion of guilt. Now, but that's all. You know, they can do something to you and not feel any remorse. That doesn't mean they still don't have other emotions. And cognitive empathy and tactical empathy, it's me understanding where you're coming from. I don't have to care about where you're coming from for me to understand where you're coming from. And once I completely understand where you're coming from, if I demonstrate that understanding to you, that has a remarkable effect on you. And that's why sociopaths love it so much, because it's really easy to apply, and it's actually really low maintenance. If I establish a bond of empathy with you, not sympathy, not sympathy, but if I establish a bond of empathy with you, my influence over you is extremely powerful.
What is the difference between empathy and sympathy for the listeners out there? I'm very familiar with the definitions of these words, but I'd love to get your take on what it means to you as a former FBI hostage negotiator. What's the difference between sympathy?
Yeah, sympathy is I care about you. I care about what happens to you. If bad things are happening to you, I feel bad. If I could help, I would. Empathy is I just understand your complete emotional perspective. And the fine line on it is, let's say you and I are in a negotiation. You're mad at me. I can say an empathy statement would be, hey, man, I can see that you're mad at me. I can see you think I'm a jerk. I can see you think I'm treating you unfairly. Most people don't have the capability of doing that because they're only comfortable articulating emotions they agree with.
Okay, so sociopaths, the textbook definition is a person with a personality disorder manifesting itself in extreme antisocial attitudes and behavior, and, little bonus, and a lack of conscience. So chapter 2 of your book is called Be a Mirror, How to Quickly Establish Rapport. I would love for you to walk our listeners through the process of building rapport, and why is it so important for people to build rapport?
Walk them through the process?
Yeah, of building rapport. How do you do it?
You said it's important to build rapport.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing it a little bit now. So being a mirror is just repeating a couple of words that you've just said. So you know that I'm hearing you. The mirror, the hostage negotiator's mirror is different than like the body language mirror. The body language mirror is if you lean forward, I got to lean forward. Hostage negotiator's mirror, it's not that complicated. It's a lot easier. Just repeating the words that the other person has said. Or maybe you might want to paraphrase it. You want to repeat it in the same meaning but change the words up. Now, what difference does that make? I'm trying to work myself to influence over you. And my influence over you is going to be strongest if you feel we have rapport. And very much hostage negotiators, Harvard negotiators, business negotiators, we're interested in not only our most powerful influences, but again, the most durable, the lowest maintenance ones. I don't want to have to keep you on a short leash. I don't want to have to talk to you every day to maintain my influence. If I've got what we refer to as trust-based influence, which flows from rapport, I may only need to talk to you a couple of times a month, and I've still got influence and we'll still make deals.
I think one of the things you're talking about right now that blows my mind, and I don't know, you've probably my job is to do research about you. I don't expect you to have done any research about me, but if you do go to djconnection.com, that was one of the first companies I started and ultimately sold. But before I sold it was one of America's largest wedding entertainment companies. And a bride-to-be would come in, to want to get the entertainment for her wedding. And essentially, I'm sure, Chris, you've been to weddings where the DJ was terrible. The band is awful. And it doesn't matter how good the food is, people leave. And so my job was to meet with the bride and the groom and to figure out what they wanted their wedding reception to look like. And what was crazy is we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma is where we were based, and some brides would say, I want to have my wedding outside. And I'm, okay, great. What day? July 3rd? And Chris, I'm sure you've been to, have you ever been to Oklahoma before, Chris?
It's kind of tough in July, isn't it?
It's like 100 degrees. And I remember my first or second, meeting, the first 5 or so, Marshall, I told the bride, I don't think you want to do that because it's so hot. The cake is going to melt. I don't know if that's a move. But the bride would ask, I want to have my wedding in July. What do you think? And I used to tell people, I don't know if that's a good move. And then I would get yelled at. They wouldn't book with me. They said they disagreed with me, whatever. And over time, I had to learn this mirror concept to say, Let me ask you this, July. What do you think would be the best thing? What do you think? Tell me what you think. And Chris, but it took me a lot of rejections to learn this idea of mirroring and establishing rapport. Where do most people get this wrong by default? Where do most people need to change?
Most people think that they have to talk first and they got to make their case. I mean, we're all dying to make our case. You know, one friend of mine was telling me he went to a negotiation course and he said that the number one objective was to make sure the other side knows where you're coming from. Well, if both people follow that, then nobody's paying attention to the other guy. The guy or gal, all they're doing is talking at the other person, trying to make their case. And really, that's where most of it breaks down. That's the first thing. The second thing is most people are yes addicts. That's a whole nother topic.
Yes addicts.
Yes addicts. Could you define just briefly what a yes addict looks like?
You know, you're talking to somebody, they're making a case to you, and they go, does that make sense? And you're scared to say yes because it did make sense, but you have problems with what they just said. And you also know if you say yes to did that make sense, they're going to continue to yammer at you for another 15 minutes, and then they're going to stop and they're going to say, does that make sense? Now, everything made sense. You didn't happen to agree with it, or what they said wasn't as important as what you said. But people are constantly seeking yes in one sense or another just so they can keep talking. And then when they get to the end, they think they've talked you into something when in fact, it made sense to you. That didn't mean you agreed.
Yeah.
Chapter 8 of your book, Chris, you write, this chapter of this book is titled Guarantee Execution: How to Spot the Liars and to Ensure Follow-Through from Everyone Else. Talk to me about the power of this chapter and what readers can find in the book.
Well, whether the person you're dealing with is lying or whether they just haven't thought things through, you got the same problem. There's no implementation there. We believe that yes is nothing without how. I mean, yes is nothing entirely. You got to get into how. So if somebody's lying to you and then you say, well, how's this going to move forward? How's this going to happen? What are we going to do next? They're going to go dead silent because they know they were lying, and they haven't thought it through. They have no idea.
Right.
You call them right out. They'll go dead silent. Now, you run into every bit as much or more the same problem with someone who figures all we need is yes, and things are going to magically appear. It'll all work out. Gandalf will come by and wave a magic wand, and everything is going to happen.
Gandalf, he's coming by.
Yeah, and they haven't thought anything through either. Their vision of implementation might be completely different of your vision of implementation or even what the agreement means. So when you go, how's this going to happen? How are we going to keep on track? How are we going to fix things when we get off track? They'll either go dead silent or they'll go, well, it'll just happen. It'll be wonderful. It'll be lovely. Either way, you're looking at a train wreck, and you got to know each one in advance so that it doesn't turn into a train wreck.
Chapter 9 of your book is called Bargain Hard: How to Get Your Price. I'd love for you to share about this chapter and why you wrote it.
I got to tell you something. That's the best we got the best bargaining system on the planet. I mean, it slaughters. If you get into bare knuckle bargaining, this slaughters anything else out there. It slaughters offer, counter offer. It slaughters high anchor. It slaughters everything. We actually borrowed it from a guy, learned it from a guy named Mike Ackerman. Mike, and we call it the Ackerman method. And Mike taught it to us when I was a hostage negotiator. We were bargaining and kidnapping. And it's a systematic approach. All bargaining takes place in about 3 rounds. Most people sit down in a negotiation and think it's going to get finished out in 1 round. Then it never is. It's usually 3 rounds. And we calculate in advance what our starting point is going to be and then what our incremental changes are. And there's psychological aspects to each one of the incremental changes. I mean, the other side feels like they're getting to the very end before you get there because you're psychologically positioning them where they feel like they got everything they could have gotten, and you made them work so hard in the process, they're actually relieved it's over, which is going to guarantee your execution because they're not going to want to do it again. So it's a great bargaining system, and people start out using the Ackerman method when they got a bargain. They usually never even get to the 3rd phase. They usually have the deal cut by no later than the 2nd phase, and they made even more money than they expected.
I strongly agree with the statement you wrote in your book where you said, another simple rule is when you are verbally assaulted, do not counteract. Instead, disarm your counterpart by asking a calibrated question. Can you break down the power of this idea? It is hot. It is huge.
Yeah, well, basically, calibrated questions are a refined set of open-ended questions. You know, the open-ended questions everybody knows are who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? So let's cut them down to just the hows and the whats. There's great power in deference, and we're going to want to start a question with either how or what, because people love to be asked how, or people love to be asked what to do. Even when they just told you what to do. Somebody could lay out to you exactly the action you want to take, and you can go look at them and go like, how am I supposed to do that? What do you want me to do? And it's just ridiculous how much you gain the upper hand on somebody. And since they feel in control, they don't know that based on how you've calibrated that question, you've actually kind of boxed them in and burdened them with all the problems that they're the ones that have probably created.
Chris, at the time of this recording, how old are you right now?
I am days away from 61.
61. So if you could go back and
Okay, let's say
the 31-year-old version, let's go back to age 31. What advice would you have for the younger version of yourself?
Be just a little nicer. Don't change, compromise any of your principles. Don't take any different positions than you took. Just be a little nicer about it. You take a couple of miles an hour off your fastball. Don't come so hard at people and you'll get much farther by being a little too. I was always pretty direct, pretty blunt. I was blunt enough that one time I had a colleague say, dealing with you is like getting hit in the face with a brick. Just be a little nicer, and you end up with fewer fights, which means you get your way sooner.
All right. Now, Chris, this next notable quotable from your book, it says, it all starts with the universally applicable premise that people want to be understood and accepted. Listening is the cheapest yet most effective concession we can make to get there. By listening intensely, a negotiator demonstrates up to that point in the quote. Can you break down what it means to listen intensely?
Yeah, it's just, it's really hearing the essence of where somebody's coming from and feeding it back to them. In every deal, there's something more important emotionally to the person than the deal. I realize that sounds really stupid, but, we've learned money is a substitute for emotional compensation. And so I'm like, all right, if what you're after is some kind of emotional satisfaction, the first of which might be being heard out, I'm going to hear you out first. I'm going to let you know I've heard you out because there's a pretty good chance it's not going to cost me a dime if I do that. And so we have this intense desire to be understood. We all work for bosses that always heard us out and never did what we asked them to do. But we thought, you know what? That boss of mine, they always hear me out. I love working for that guy or that gal. I mean, it's a powerful intangible that I take advantage of as often as I can.
You wrote, by listening intensely, a negotiator demonstrates empathy and shows a sincere desire to better understand what the other side is experiencing. You also went on to write in Never Split the Difference, but neither wants nor needs are where we start. It begins with listening, making it all about the other people, validating their emotions, and creating enough trust and safety for a real conversation to begin. For somebody out there who's sincerely listening and saying, you know what, I struggle to ever create enough sincere trust with people, what advice would you give them? What's the starting point?
Well, if you go back to my original definition of empathy, which is it's neither agreement nor disagreement, then you can hear anybody out. As long as it doesn't require you to either agree or disagree, it doesn't matter what their position is. And that's what begins to develop this bond, as this influence ability of trust and rapport and empathy and predictability. And it's a really tiny little line of not agreeing and not disagreeing, and now you're unlimited. if you need to agree to hear somebody out, that's where people get into trouble. And that's why they so many of these conversations are frustrating, because, well, I can't hear you out because that means I'm going to agree, or I have to agree to hear you out. Now, take that away, and your power to negotiate kind of becomes limitless.
I have 4 final questions for you, one from Marshall and one from Steve Currington. My first question for you is, what book or books would you recommend for all the entrepreneurs out there? In addition, obviously, to your own Never Split the Difference. Is there 1 or 2 books you'd recommend for all of our listeners, all of our entrepreneurial business owner, or at least soon-to-be or want-to-be business owners out there listening?
Yeah, all right. So a couple different ones for a couple different reasons. Eric Barker's book called Barking Up the Wrong Tree is The Science of Success. And Eric did a fantastic job just looking at success at all levels. And he's a regular guy. He writes from a regular guy standpoint. And if his book would have come out while I was still teaching in the different business schools, I'd have made his book assigned reading. It's got phenomenal stuff across the board. If you're a business leader, The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle is about how to make a great culture within your business and how a great culture is necessary to succeed. He also wrote The Talent Code if you want to get better as a performer. And it's very much about how to bring out your maximum abilities and how to practice and how to get better faster. He talks a lot about accelerated learning.
Next question for you. I'm sorry.
I got to throw one more out there.
Yeah, sorry. The Skype cut out real quick there. Sorry about that.
That's right. The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler. Phenomenal book about the science of flow. And no matter what you're doing, if you want to succeed, you got to get into flow. You got to get into the zone. And Kotler's book is fantastic on that.
How do you spend the first 4 hours of every day?
Well, I try to tune my brain up into a positive frame of mind, which, it's become a cliche. I live in Southern California. I'm not from Southern California. There's being grateful is, everybody in Southern California says, I'm so grateful. But in reality, that'll help you perform throughout the day. It's one of the ways Ferris says, win the morning, win the day. You're going to win if you're in a positive frame of mind, if you're in a gratitude state of mind. And then it's, for me, my most creative time. If I want to create material, it's most likely in the morning. So I get the brain tuned up in a positive frame of mind, which I'm smarter, more effective, and then I'm trying to get some good stuff done early in the morning.
What time do you wake up?
I like about 7.5 hours sleep, and it depends upon what time zone I was in the night before. Ideally, I'm up at 6.
Got it. Okay, Marshall Morris, I give you the floor. Final hot question you have for Mr. Chris Voss. And then Steve Currington, the incredible show sponsor, you get the last word there. So, Marshall, what do you got?
So we have listeners all around the world, and they're taking all of the action items away from what you're talking about here on the episode, and I encourage them to go get the book if they want to learn more. For all of the listeners that are looking to take away one action step for implementing and maybe practicing some of the things that you're talking about here, how would you encourage somebody to get good at negotiating without having a bountiful amount of negotiating scenarios? How do you begin to implement this and practice this?
Yeah, small stakes practice gives you high stakes results. So in your ordinary everyday conversations, start making it a point to hear the other side out. If the conversation doesn't matter, then it's not going to hurt you to hear them out before you have your say. So just practice that a little bit. You kind of be astonished at how much better your conversations will go. Plus, it'll give you a lot of practice in areas that's not going to cost you any money.
Good stuff right there. Steve Currington, what's your hot question for Mr. Chris Voss?
I have 2. 1, where in SoCal?
West Hollywood.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Cool. That's my favorite place to go. I've got my cars in Huntington Beach right now, and I'm going there in a week. So
He's a Lamborghini driver, and he has like a car club. Chris, he's part of a car club, and they travel around.
Oh, you're a car club.
He goes out there to Southern California.
I love Southern California, so I love. So anyway, when I hear SoCal, there's a bunch of us out there. But the other thing, I'm captivated by the interview, and I'm listening, and so I don't know how you might be able to answer this, but I would imagine that you've had do you think you've had like a lot of training in, I guess, your speaking ability? Because I think a lot of people discount. When I listen to you, you speak very slowly. You speak very clearly. Is that a skill that you picked up when you're FBI Hostage Negotiator? Is that something that you've refined over time? Because I think for a lot of people like myself, I'm a fast talker, but I'd really like to learn that, how to, you say listen and slow down, because I think throughout the entire interview, that's what's kind of captivating, because you're very precise and very concise and very slow. So did you learn that over the years? Do you feel like you are continuing to improve that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I've always worked at that. Always been trying to continue to improve, pick up hints wherever I can. And as a hostage negotiator, we focused a lot on how you said things, because if how I say it, I can begin to affect your mental state of mind before I've even finished the sentence. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to get started on that, and then I'm going to change things in different ways and change my tone of voice, if nothing else, just to help you pay attention so I'm not boring.
I'm standing back the entire time, and Clay knows because I'm looking at him. I'm staring at Clay like during the entire interview, and I'm doing these like explosions of the brain because I'm like, I literally wanted to say, he's inside your head right now, Clay. Like when you asked about how you would demonstrate empathy, and you said you're doing it right now, and I was like, oh my God. Take my wallet. Here you go, sir. So anyway, I really enjoyed listening to you, and thanks for answering.
Chris, I appreciate you being on today's show more than you know. If you're ever in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area, we have about a 20,000 square foot facility there where we have conferences and we coach clients, and we would love to meet you. But again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be on the show.
My pleasure. It's this went really fast. It was fun talking to you guys.
Well, you have a blessed evening, and if I ever need someone to negotiate on my behalf, I am calling you, sir.
Yeah, me too.
And and a last bit of information.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a newsletter. Can we tell people about that?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, we put it out once a week. It comes out on Tuesday mornings, and it's short and sweet and concise, which I think is one of the big advantages, because some people's newsletters, there's so many choices, you don't know what to read. And it's free. It's complimentary. A former colleague in the federal government used to love to say, if it's free, I'll take 3. So, and it's a gateway to everything that we teach. The name of the newsletter is called The Edge. It comes out on Tuesday mornings. All you got to do to sign up is a text to sign up function. You send the message FBI Empathy, all one word. Don't let your spell check put a space between FBI and empathy. And you text that message to the number 22828, and it's 22828. If you sent the message in all one word, you'll get a dialog box back that'll ask you to sign up. It's a gateway to everything that we have. It's a gateway to the website. We got announcements about new material. If we're training someplace, it tells people about where the training is taking place. It's a gateway to everything we have.
I want you to repeat that one more time, because someone out there is trying to write this down. We have a lot of listeners that listen while they drive. Someone's pulling over right now like, oh my gosh, I got to pull over. Can you repeat again the message we're supposed to text and the number we're supposed to text it to?
Sure. The message to text is FBI Empathy, EMPATHY. Make it all one word. Don't let your autocorrect put a space between FBI and empathy. And send the message FBI Empathy, all one word, to the number 22828. And that's 22828.
Chris, I appreciate you so much. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and we are blessed to know you, sir.
Thank you very much. The same to you, fellas.
Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
Steve, without any further ado, we always like to end each and every show with a boom. And here we go. 3,